For generations, midwives have dedicated themselves to personalising the pregnancy journey for mothers, babies and their families. They're a constant support in what can be the most exciting but also the most challenging time as a parent. But how has that role evolved over time and what could it look like in the future? Today I'm joined by 4 women who bring a range of different experiences and perspectives to our conversation. They're all Mater midwives, part of the exceptional team delivering 12,000 babies each year at Mater Mothers Hospitals at South Brisbane, Redland, Rockhampton, Mackay and Townsville. So join us as we discuss the changing face of midwifery, what it is, what it has been and what it could be this International Day of the Midwife. Well, let's jump straight into our Q&A. So I'd love to hear from each of you as to why you chose to become a midwife. Charmaine, we might start with you.
Wonderful. I think I became a midwife to support women. I think having my own babies found the value in midwifery care. I thought I missed the boat in becoming a midwife because I had my babies young and then, was raising them and found a pathway through education and became a midwife. And then I guess for me the value is in supporting women throughout that journey and watching them transition from one form of self to their new form of self. So that is the driving force for the midwifery.
And after 9 babies, no doubt you're ready to pass on some more knowledge.
It does help. There's a little bit of acquired skill there and practical skill, but I never try and impart my journey into other women because we're all individual in how we approach motherhood. But it certainly does help to relate, particularly in the postnatal period. I think that really helps with having toddlers and seeing mums postnatally. So it certainly, has helped.
Okay, what about you?
For me, I also had my first child very young and I studied nursing prior to embarking on midwifery, and I had some loved ones say, "Oh, you should study midwifery, you'd be a great midwife." And I almost didn't want to take the magic out of the process because I find bringing a life into the world so sacred almost that I didn't want to reveal any of those secrets. And then I was looking up furthering my education and saw a course for midwifery and went, "Oh, all right, I'll do it," and spoke to my partner and he was like, "Absolutely, yeah." And so then I was lucky enough to get into that course, and then from there the magic just grew. The synchronicity of women and babies is just so phenomenal. I feel really lucky and honoured to be in the role that I'm in as a midwife.
It's beautiful hearing you speak about it because it does attract a very special, gentle nature of person and you can just tell how much you value what you get to do. So that's wonderful. Ellie, what about you?
So I was 4 years old when I said to my dad one day, "I'm going to be a nurse, Daddy." And he goes, "Okay," like parents do. They just listen to you because every week you come up with something new. I always was going to be a nurse. So I got to my teens and I decided I didn't want to just be a nurse, I wanted to be a midwife as well. There were lots of children in the streets and who used to go and do all the babysitting, it was always me. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. But I decided that I didn't want to become a midwife until I had experienced nursing. I wanted to understand the body, I wanted to understand how people work and how people then become sick and know how to care for them before I did my midwifery. So I actually had my 3 children before I started my mid. So even though I did nursing early in my career, I did my midwifery later. And I just fell in love with it from that very first delivery. I still get goosebumps when I go into the birthing unit. I just absolutely love it. It's an absolutely privilege to be with a woman when she's birthing. But it's not just about the birthing, it's about everything else that you encompass into that journey with that woman.
Gives me goosebumps hearing you talk about it. Stacey, what about you?
I didn't know what midwives were when I was graduating high school. And I remember applying through university and they called me and said, "Would you like to interview?" And I said, "No." no, thank you. I really don't want to interview for anything special. I'll just do the nursing. And then the course coordinator called me and she just said, you know what, just come for a day, do the few subjects, see how you feel. And I fell in love right from the get-go. She taught me the history of midwives and it was so exciting and new, and she created such a, I guess, a mindset going into midwifery, and then my first birth just solidified it. I had a beautiful water birth at 2 a.m. and it was the thing that sold me. And then I stayed. I found the Mater while I was studying, and the Mater stayed with me. I stayed right through my graduate program into my nursing into where I am now. But yeah, I did both my degrees straight out of university, so I haven't had any babies. But it doesn't mean I don't think it isn't a privilege. It's definitely a privilege.
And it's really special that you haven't had any babies, because we get that contrast with our panel here as someone who hasn't yet had children versus someone who's had 9 children or 3 children. So it's really special. And I also love when you said, I had my first baby, a water birth at 2 a.m. I think that's really special because it is a lot like you being part of that team, and very, very real. For some of you, you would know, I mean, in the early days of the profession, midwives weren't actually required to be literate. The way in which the job was conducted is very different. They used basic instincts. Obviously, there's been a lot of medical advancements. There's a lot of things you can use at your disposal throughout that process. What have you seen as the biggest changes in the time that each of you have been in your profession? Anything come to mind?
I think one of the biggest things, that you noticed, especially through, through the ages, especially going from, like the 60s to the 70s, is having the fathers there, having those fathers and having the fathers present. It's almost frowned upon if the dads don't come into the deliveries now, but why don't you want to be there? Because it's part of them as well. This baby's their baby. It's mum and dad's. So, to encompass them and to get them involved in that journey.
Another thing that's had a lot more light shone is mental health. So for women, for their partners, for the broader community, I think mental health is probably not a new phenomenon. However, our way of working with women or partners with mental health issues has really changed and evolved. And it's a positive thing that we can recognise the need for improvement in services and supporting holistically. It's really important.
I'm interested still in that with the changes of technology, but how those basic instincts and I guess just being in tune with the mother, how in a way, I mean, there's plenty of people around the world that are still birthing in fields. I mean, Charmaine, how much is it, you just got to be in tune and be in the room?
Yeah, it's very primal at the end of the day. I think you can have all of the equipment around you and everything that opens and shuts, but at the end of the day, it's quite an instinctual profession that encourages you to trust a lot. And I think that's part of being with women, is not only trusting in yourself as a midwife and in your training and the people around you to support you, but also encouraging the woman to trust herself and that relationship throughout the pregnancy, so that when you do enter that space, it is just filled with trust.
You've touched on those advances, and it is a lot of research, a lot of technological advancements have happened in that time. What would each of you say could be real game changers in the midwifery space in the time that you have maybe worked in the industry?
So technology has changed remarkably since I began as a midwife up until now. So the other project that I'm working on with a whole team of midwives and doctors led by Professor Sailesh Kumar is looking at using sildenafil citrate, a tablet in labour, to reduce fetal distress. therefore improve birth outcomes for women and babies. And that's amazing, amazing. So what we've found in phase 2 of our research is that women who have a tablet called sildenafil citrate, in comparison to the placebo, are 50% less likely to need an operative birth for fetal distress.
So exciting.
Right, basically halved the amount of women having a caesarean, vacuum or forceps for their bubs becoming stressed in labour, which is amazing, because how you welcome your baby into the world has both short-term and long-term health implications. So if we can help improve the trajectory for women and babies at that point, amazing.
The Mater obviously has dedicated mothers' hospitals both here in the southeast but also in Townsville and Mackay and Rockhampton. Stacey, you've flown to join us from Townsville. What's the journey like for our regional midwives? Do you feel that regional patients have access to the same care and hospital environment that, say, you'd think people might see in the big smoke?
Absolutely, I believe so. Well, we often have a lot of regional women come and see us, anything from Innisfail down to Mackay region. A lot of them come from properties, some are only accessible during the dry season, or they have to be helicoptered out during the wet season, so they do often stay with us for a fairly long time.
And I imagine the care for these families is just so wonderful that you probably struggle to get rid of them.
Well, I definitely struggle to send them home. We do love having them. They're such beautiful girls that have travelled to see us, and they kind of feel like family by the end of it.
Yeah, how did they go being away from their
It's definitely a struggle. Majority of them have family in Townsville and are lucky to do so. The ones who don't can get quite lonely, but they will pop in and see us as much as possible and hopefully make new friends. We try and put them in touch with mothers groups and people alike who they can spend some time with.
And I would assume that it's the same as down at Mater Redlands, whereas all of our midwives can access all the education that the midwives access from Mater South Brisbane. Our midwives can still access all of their training, all of their online courses.
So definitely, it's really good.
It's
to
a
have that.
really nice big family and you're able to all lean on each other, which is really wonderful. Gone are the days when we would only look at a woman or a mother's sort of physical health during pregnancy, birth, and even in that postpartum phase. So now it's really holistic. We're looking at a mother's mental health. We're looking at the father. A lot of you would come into contact with dad, but also with the baby. How important would you say that is for the family's overall health and well-being as they're navigating this journey?
Oh, absolutely critical. I think it's probably the most important part of our job is to look at the whole family unit as one, and the transition and the dynamic changes as that, you know, the pregnancy continues and then the baby's born, and then what does the postnatal period look like, and having that nice understanding and foundation with them throughout the journey. So for me, working in continuity and understanding what they were like when they booked in, and then what has the journey been like for them throughout their pregnancy, and seeing that dynamic change and helping them adjust to their new roles.
I think it's important now that we give families, you know, mums and dads, you know, they get permission now to say, I'm not coping. And they can actually reach out now and actually say, you know, I need more support than what I thought I was going to require. You know, I think that's a really important change that we've seen within the midwifery field.
And what's so remarkable about what you do is because you're experts. I know for myself, Charmaine was my midwife during my second pregnancy, and then in my postpartum days I presented for my appointment, and she picked up a red flag in me that I was really brushing away. And I'd had a kid before. I think you know what you're doing, and she just said to me, just keep an eye on that, because that could actually be this. And if she hadn't have said that to me, I actually wonder the deep hole I would have found myself in trying to pull myself out. And it's just, the difference is you're the experts. You're navigating this with a family, and the job's not done just because baby's here. Yeah. And that is what's so remarkable about what you get to do. And it wasn't a physical potential red flag, but more an emotional one. And you're so readily available to help women to understand that, which is what is so wonderful about that holistic care, and that goes right through to postpartum. Yeah. I'd love to hear from each of you if there is one moment or experience from any of you, like the real top moment where you think, gosh, being a midwife is just incredible. Do each of you have a story like that that really rings true for you all the time?
Oh, my brain is just gone to every, oh, that one, no, that one. There's so many. There is honestly so many. I think every aspect of care, from the moment like meeting someone when they've just found out they're pregnant, that moment of, oh my gosh, either they weren't expecting it or they were, that surprise and elation. And even if they were expecting it, still that shock that this is actually happening, and being in that space with them and celebrating that, and or even in the same sense of what does this actually look like and how do you feel about this, and giving them the time and space to feel those emotions. And then I obviously birth and pregnancy and everything in between, that's just watching that evolve and mums come to their being.
What about you, Ellie?
I think the one that really sticks to mind is my very last birth as a student. And I was caring for a lady who'd had multiple miscarriages. Then she delivered a stillbirth. So she was obviously devastated. She was scared. She was frightened. She was coming in to have this baby, you know, praying everything was going to be okay. And we monitored her really, really closely. And she kept on saying, I can't do it, I can't do that. I just can't do this. I can't do this time. You know, I've lost the last one. You know, I've lost all my other babies. Am I really going to have a baby? Well, when it came to the time of the birth, we didn't need to say anything. It was just magical. It was just so beautiful when you got to lift that baby and put it up on her chest. We didn't need to say anything. Me and the obstetrician both just stood back and just left them.
That's awesome.
What a privilege.
It was a privilege, yeah.
I'd love to know about the camaraderie that midwives experience. You rarely work alone. You've usually got a sidekick with you when you're in that birth suite. What is the bond like for the people you work with, and how important would you say that is for the birth moment?
It's hard to describe it in words. I once had a patient describe it to me. She was a beautiful woman, and she said, I knew something bad was happening, but you were communicating with the other midwife with your eyes. She said you had a whole conversation in seconds, and she knew something was serious when we actually both looked at her and said, you know, it's time. We need to do this now. But that's what it's like. I put full trust that those girls know exactly what we're doing, and to have you back constantly, just amazing.
Yeah. We have the privilege of caring for women at their most powerful but also most vulnerable times. We're used to associating with that level of emotion, so embracing our colleagues with that as well is amazing, to be each other's safety net.
You do get some pretty unique experiences together that other people will never be able to understand. With all of that said, how would each of you like to see midwifery evolve, or where do you see it heading in the next, say, 20 or 30 years? Hard to imagine with things like artificial intelligence, and that technology seems to be moving quickly, but how do you think it will or maybe won't change?
I definitely hope that we're not replaced by robots. Maybe it would be good for night shifts, being a robot of myself I could send out to work. But I certainly, you know, still love getting in the car at 2 in the morning and racing for a birth. I wouldn't change that in the world. But I think having continuity of care and having a known midwife for women makes such a difference.
But at the end of the day, I don't think we'll ever change the fact that a mother will always need a caring woman, a midwife with her for that labour and that delivery.
Anything, Stacey, that comes to mind about, say, the future in some of our regional mater hospitals?
I think I'd definitely like to have more time with my women, have more continuity of care. How that looks might differ though. I think we'd have to do a lot more telehealth. We have a lot of regional girls who live hours away and often do forms of shared care with their obstetricians, let alone with us. But I'm really interested to see what that could look like for us. Home visiting has been around for years, but to have it with us too, that would be really lovely. To have those types of aspects come to Townsville and be a part of MARTA would be amazing.
Well, thank you so much to our exceptional panel for their interesting conversation about midwifery, the heartwarming stories and the heartbreaking stories, the challenges faced and the advances made, and of course the opportunities that it continues to offer, particularly here at the MARTA. Have a wonderful International Day of the Midwife, and we will see you next year.